Episode 16, we think, but we're back. I'm also joining the smartest coach in all of CrossFit. No,
Thanks,
just
man.
kidding.
Yeah,
The greatest leader in all of CrossFit and the smartest coach in all of CrossFit, and then the most homeless-looking coach in all of CrossFit are here today for episode 16. And we're going to go over strength and all strengths. So strength is not just your 1 rep max. That's actually what we should have titled it.
We should.
Strength is not just your 1 rep max.
Yeah, I think an easy way to kind of start the conversation is to ask the audience. You can't look on the game's website. You can't go back in your database. Who won 23.2A, which was the max thruster event for the males? Does anybody know those names, right? You maybe just think about it for a second and then go back to 19.2, another strength event. That was the double under, toe to bar, and then the squat clean ladder. Who won that event? And surprise, surprise, the 19.2 winners were Froning, Frazier, Vellner, because the barbells went up in load and you had to be able to repeat it over and over again. And those 3 guys happened to be in the top 5 of the open leaderboard that year. Now, if we fast forward to 23.2, those 3 guys that won the maximal strength event, the max thruster, guess what their average finish was? I'm just throwing it out to you, Foster.
500. Not probably outside the top 1,000.
18,000th place
crap.
in the open. Now, some of them probably
you know their names.
I do know their names.
Say their names.
I'm not going to call them out. The reason that we bring this up is just like when we think about strength in CrossFit, I think everyone's always like, I just need to get stronger. And that is one element, especially for those athletes that come in and they're just like super weak. Like that's me right now. I'm like, I did a workout with Haley yesterday and I'm like, she's stronger than I am, which is kind of embarrassing for a grown man. But for most people, they come in and maybe they're kind of moderate strength or they already are strong, but they still suffer in CrossFit workouts. And one of the reasons is they don't have any strength endurance. So we want to kind of introduce that concept and then talk about ways that we can program for strength endurance for the athletes that need that maybe are strong or already are strong enough to get through the open and maybe bubble level semifinal or trying to qualify for a Wadapalooza. And there's always that 10-minute AMRAP of 20 snatches at this load, then 20 snatches at this load, and then an AMRAP at a heavy load, but they can't cycle the barbell well. Or you just saw it in age group semis. You're seeing it at semifinals now with heavy Isabel where people just can't cycle that barbell.
For sure. I even had athletes after quarterfinals last year come back from that like clean and jerk workout, and they're like, why are the first 2 bars killing me? Right? And it's like, even though they, like that female in that workout is clean and jerking 245, and the male that was feeling the same thing is clean and jerking 365. But a 135 for 20 reps or 10 reps is like smoking them.
Yeah, it completely blows them up. And part of that is like movement efficiency, which we'll talk about with strength. But the other part is like most people just think about training strength isolated from the rest of the sport. So I see this in a lot of programs, and this is a programming fault. It's like, okay, we're just doing strength work as our first couple pieces, and then we're going right into CrossFit-based work, but we're not integrating strength into CrossFit or doing true strength endurance protocols. So that is, I think, the kind of starting point for the conversation. But I do think, maybe Jake, you can touch on this a little bit. Before we get into strength endurance work, like how do you think about the athlete that maybe is weak? So like we talked about this before, but weak Wendy shows up. We'll use the alliterations for all these avatars. And her max snatch is 95 pounds. Her back squat is only 165 pounds. Her front squat's 135 pounds. Like clearly she can't even do the open. That kind of strength profile is going to look different than maybe the games athlete or the bubble level athlete. So where would you start with someone maybe that doesn't have the strength that's needed in the sport?
Yeah, honestly, I think a lot of time. Well, I'm gonna answer your question with a question.
Yeah,
that's not against the rules. Do you think?
Foul.
Yeah,
you're not allowed.
Do you see more athletes coming to you that don't do enough strength under fatigue or strength endurance work, like sport-specific strength training, we'll call it for now, or do you see more athletes who haven't, we'll say, like earned the right to do that work yet? Like the weak Wendy's kind of answers your question of where I would approach that. Like just personally, over the years of coaching, where do you think most athletes fall on that spectrum for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've worked with mostly masters athletes over the last 5 or 6 years, and I think a lot of them actually are doing a ton of strength endurance work because they're following a group program that maybe adds it in, or they've had a coach. However, their limitation is movement efficiency, which we'll talk about when we talk about strength endurance work, because that is part of being enduring, is moving with less effort than your peer. But that's also something where you have to go back to the drawing board and be like, hey, look, you're doing a lot of this strength, quote unquote, strength endurance work, but you're not getting any benefit out of it because you're always getting stuck at that last barbell, or you're redlining in the first barbell, to Dom's point of like, you did the 135-pound bar,
Right.
and then you had to take a 2-minute break before you added the load for the next one because you were already so blown up. So taking them back to the drawing board and saying, we're going to work on movement efficiency, true strength, isolating the strength endurance work so it's not just integrated with CrossFit, and then eventually introducing CrossFit back into it makes sense. On the other side, though, I've had a lot of masters athletes that have come to me, in particular female athletes that have maybe really good squat strength, but they're pretty weak in their upper body. And that's normal, right? Like males are usually 30 to 40% stronger with their upper body than females just in general. And so if you get into the sport of CrossFit, the same rules kind of apply. Most people, even if they are strong, are still not quite strong enough to be able to do a ton of handstand push-ups or the row shoulder overhead workout that we just saw in age groups. That last barbell becomes a huge limitation. So for those athletes, you do need to isolate the true strength, maximal strength work. But kind of going back to that main point, as a coach, and for all the athletes that are listening, you need to identify what limitations you have first and make sure that's the majority of your programming in the off season so that you're driving up whatever that rate limiting step is.
Yeah, to go back to week Wendy, I mean, I kind of alluded to it in asking you the question. I would say most of the athletes that I coach or have coached over the last several years, I don't know the right way of saying it. They haven't quite earned the right to do the strength endurance work yet, or do strength under fatigue. It's like you just got to do strength work, right, on its own. I think an analogy that always pops in my head that maybe I've used in conversations is like, look, if you can do 3 unbroken ring muscle ups, but I can get you from 3 to 9, I don't really care if you never do ring muscle ups under fatigue. If you go from 3 to 9 unbroken ring muscle ups, any ring muscle up workout you do, you're going to get better at.
Yeah.
So if you snatch, for week Wendy, this is like the lower level female. I don't know, maybe she's snatching what, like 115, 120, but I get your snatch to 150. I don't really care if you've never done Isabel before. Like your Isabel time is going to get better just from you adding 30 pounds to your snatch. I think one thing that we could talk about real practically too, and this is something I could get clarity on as well, is at what point do you draw the line and go, you're either, strong enough, which we know is so relative and subjective to the person and their goals. Right. And then 2, at what point do we say, it doesn't really matter how strong you are. At some point you have to play the game in preparation for a competition.
For sure.
Like really practically speaking to those athletes, like, hey, at this point in your preparation for a comp, I don't really care if you can't snatch 150. You probably should do some strength under fatigue. Right. I think that'd be cool to touch on in a bit. But that's how I think about week Wendy. It's like we got to earn the right to do that work first.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've had athletes in the past that just definitely need absolute strength only, but some of those athletes are like fit enough already when I get them. So they'll make like a semifinal or like an RX Wadapalooza or something like that. And they technically still need to work on absolute strength overall. But like if the Wadapalooza is in 2 months and they want to do RX and I never have them work on like I'm thinking of a girl specifically in my head that can pretty much, when I started with her, she could move like 85% of most of her lifts and workouts. Great. But we backed off it so much to push up her 1RMs that she like needed to feel it again. And if I didn't do that before Wadapalooza, she probably would have died.
Yeah.
Like in every workout, even though she was stronger.
Yeah.
Right? That involved cycling a barbell or cycling a dumbbell. In this case, it's the 70-pound dumbbell that I was thinking about. Like if I didn't put some of that back in because I was just working on absolute strength.
If we could speak to like this, the specific, because then I'm thinking back, I'm almost kind of responding to myself, which is like, I say, hey, most people probably haven't earned the right yet. But I think there probably is actually a large amount of dudes in particular that I've coached that come to me and they're actually they just want to throw down local comps and they're strong enough, right? And it's actually, hey, you would be better served by getting much better at moving your 85% of your 1 rep max in a local competition setting than you would spending the next 2 years trying to add 10 pounds to your snatch because you've been training for 15 years.
For
already.
Sure. I mean, that's such a good point. I think this is where having a coach helps, or at least having a plan for yourself helps. And everything starts with, what are your goals, right? So if someone comes to me and says, hey, my goal, I just had this conversation with someone the other day that just came on. I'm waiting until I'm in the 55 to 59 category. This person's 53. We have 2 years. And the only thing that they're focused on is 2 years from now. So for them, they're going through a true absolute strength progression. A lot of it's very linear. We're going to drive up their 1RMs, and we're not going to think a ton about strength endurance or even conditioning right now. But if that conversation was, hey, I want to prep for this qualifier in July, then the way that we train that athlete is going to look different because we have a shorter runway. So longer runways, or you have a long-term goal that you're trying to go after, then maybe you plan it in a more structured way where it's like, we're going to do maximal strength first, and then we kind of blend into that performance, which is strength endurance, which matters so much in the sport of CrossFit. I think the challenge for most athletes is they say they have a long-term goal.
Nobody sticks to it.
They struggle sticking to just those long linear progressions with strength work because it's hard to see the progress.
I've never coached anybody that says that they want a long-term plan and they've actually followed through. Maybe I'm just a crappy coach, but like, but in their defense, it's hard, right? Like, I think about Olympians all the time, like, you know, whose sole focus is the Olympics, like 4-year training plans. I think about Michael Phelps, like being in the pool, and that's his pinnacle competition, and he's got to wait 4 years for it. Like, I don't know how they do it, but I don't think I can objectively say I've never coached one person who's like, put me on a 3-year plan, they stuck to it. And that's not a shot at them. It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to go back to your original question of like, okay, where do you kind of draw the line and how do you start integrating that stuff? I think that, like I said, the first thing is have a conversation with the athlete about the goals. And if you're listening to this and you're an athlete, you need to have a legit conversation with yourself about what your goals are and how much they mean to you. I always tell people, like, if you really say that you want to do this, you know, I want to make a semifinal, I want to qualify for Wadapalooza, then if you really mean it, you're going to stick to the process. Like, that does matter. Now, the outcome matters too, but if you don't follow the process, it's hard to get to that outcome. And then as a coach, we have to have that conversation with them. Hey, Wadapalooza is coming up. Let's say it's October and we have this many months. Here's the first 3 months. We're going to work on a lot of maximal strength. We'll retest those, and then we'll blend strength endurance. Giving the athlete a plan, or again, if you're just the athlete writing for yourself or following a group program, at least have that plan in your head of like, I'm only focused on building my maximal strength, and then I'm going to blend it into more performance-based strength endurance work. That matters. Now, your other question was like, how do you know? Like, where are those thresholds? And I think I'm going to answer it again by saying it helps having a coach that knows what those thresholds are. You know, one of the things that I've done with all my master's athletes is I know kind of like, what are the target numbers for a 35 to 39, or what are the target numbers for 45 to 49? And we actually, Jake, were just talking about this the other day where I shared a little document that had a graph on there of like, for the max clean and jerk under fatigue, the average was 315 for 35 to 39 now. And I mean, that's strong. Most people aren't even anywhere close to that. So if I have a 35-year-old that's coming in and says, I want to be competitive at a semifinal level, I know I need to drive that up to where he can hit that. Or, you know, for the ladies, I think it was like 212 pounds or 15 pounds, something like that. They need to be able to get to that number, but that may take a year or 2 years. So we try to get them as close to that as we can. And then once we have maybe a 3 to 5 month runway leading into a competition, that's when we start integrating some of that strength endurance work that we're talking about.
Dom, I feel like you've probably had have you had an athlete or two, or maybe even more, stick to that long-term plan?
Yeah.
I feel like you've done, where I've learned from you real quick, and you can speak to this, is like, you've done a good job. This is what's fun, having a staff and team. One of the biggest things with Dom I've learned is like pushing people to compete in the off season, like have fun, go to in-person events. Don't worry about training for it.
Yeah.
Like, just train through it, but show up and throw down and have fun. I think I never discouraged that, but I never encouraged it either. And I think that I probably would have had more people stick to a long-term strength development plan had I encouraged that more.
Yeah, I think people just like, when you lay out a 2-year plan or a 3-year plan, they see their friends or something like qualify for something that they want to qualify for, and then they like overanalyze like everything they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so I think when you put in like a comp and you can convince people to like be okay with just getting like crushed in a couple workouts, if they see the things they're working on in that comp like getting better, it encourages the like long-term plan for them. So like, I've had plenty of athletes do off-season comps, and like maybe they don't come nearly as close to like maybe how they felt fitness-wise at a semifinal or even in a quarterfinal or whatever level they were at, get in the comp, and basically what they were working on in the off-season, they did way better on than they had done in the past, and that like encourages them to like be like, okay, I need to just keep doing my strength work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why I've always like at least tried to force people to one. And then I think typically what I try to do in that as well is, well, maybe I shouldn't give the secret away in case my clients watch it, but it's like I'll put in like a couple workouts that look like a comp workout like once a week, and I'll tell them that we're like doing a mini prep for the comp, but really we're not actually prepping for
Crap,
the comp.
dude, you just screwed yourself.
Yeah.
But it is though, because like There is, I don't know if you guys would agree with this, but there is a level, I think, of going into a comp and just remembering like how painful workouts can be.
Sure.
And if you haven't really done that and you kind of forget how to push yourself, then you're like, I'm unprepared for the comp. But if you like keep the main template of your like off season as the priority or in the first sessions, then I can sprinkle in like 2 sessions a week, a month out from the comp, where we're hitting just like I look at old workouts from whatever that competition is, and we do a version of it or a style like that. And it just reminds those clients how to like kill themselves in a workout. And even if they're like, oh my gosh, my burpees suck right now, I can just be like, well, they should. That means we're doing everything right. I'm putting this in here just to help you be ready for the competition in 3 weeks. Yeah. And then we're going to go back to our off season after the comp and like take that out again.
Those which I know now this will be another topic, but we call them lactic hits, right? Which, probably not all that accurate anymore. We won't dive into that, but I know the purpose of those, I think people misunderstand them, right? Like they think it's not purely physiological, but it is psychological as well. It's literally just to prepare you to suffer well. Yeah. So yeah, I like that.
I mean, I think the psychological component is just as important as improving someone's fitness. They have to believe in themselves. So one, like you have to have a coach that you believe in to get better. I think that's really important. But two, you have to expose yourself to the chaos of the sport. It's the same. I've talked about this before, but like when I played football, if we just practice and it's just like, oh, take a handoff, you get really good at the handoff. But then all of a sudden, if I get in a game and I never practice the full speed, when I take that handoff, when someone's running at me full speed that's twice my size, it's really hard to execute well. So yes, I want to practice all the little things, the footwork, the handoff and all that, but I need to do a scrimmage in that sport. And so the same thing, we have to scrimmage the sport of CrossFit where it's like, yes, you are still getting exposure to hard, 15-minute AMRAP or this long chipper workout that may come out in a competition. So that's vitally important.
So let's speak to Week Wendy and Average Allen. If these are, people going into the off season, they've got some off season comps. Shout out Atlantic Coast Throwdown in Florida, old Bacon Beatdown. I don't know why that's the first one that always comes to mind. 6-1-5 Throwdown in Nashville. All these like smaller local competitions, and they need to drive up their 1 rep max strength because they're not quite at that. Which we maybe we can touch on that more specifically, but those specific numbers that they need to be at in order to earn the right to do strength endurance work. How do you guys approach that competition? Are you saying I'm going to train all the way, like we're going to do the strength program, I've got you on a 12-week back squat cycle, just for an example with Week Wendy, and we're going to compete at week 8. Are you going to taper Week Wendy at all? Are you going to pull back a little bit that week so she can go throw down? You're going to train right up through it? You're going to get her right back into training on Monday? Like, how do you make those decisions very practically for how they approach those?
Yeah, so for the athlete that is weak, let's say that we're using Week Wendy. This could be
soft.
Yeah,
could be.
Yeah,
no, I'm just kidding.
What's an alliteration for a guy that's weak too?
Weak Wayne.
Weak Wayne. Yeah, there we go. Weak Wayne or Weak Wendy. If they don't have the strength to play the game, then again, that is priority number one. So I would have a conversation with that athlete. I know you're doing this competition, but still, we're looking at long-term goals. We want to continue to drive up your strength. So they're doing a lot of maximal strength work. And then probably 6 weeks out from the competition is when I'll start blending it in, just more CrossFit-based stuff. Now, the problem still comes in if they can't do the number or the load, the poundage that is in the workout. So like we had people for the semifinal workout that heavy Isabel is going to be a huge problem. Or for those that did the age group heavy Isabel, that they could only do a couple reps. We saw that on the leaderboard. That's a really hard place to be because you can't really train it. And so the conversation has to be, we're just going to keep doing maximal strength work so that you can at least hit 1 rep in competition or 2 reps in competition. And then we'll come back to the drawing board after this competition. As far as tapering an athlete, I still think it's really important that we keep high quality principles in there, even if it's like a fun weekend competition where we're tapering them. I like 7 to 10 days out. If it's a high level athlete, maybe it's like 10 to 14 days out, where they're actually lowering the volume, the intensity stays high, and maybe they get off of those linear progressions just for those week or 2.
What about the week after even?
The week after, it depends.
I just hammered, like even a 1-day comp on a Saturday, but they went hard. They did 4 workouts on a Saturday, and then typically Monday you'd have them squatting heavy. What do you do on that Monday?
Yeah. A lot of times I'll still deload them the week after, at least for like 3 to 4 days, or they can do a lot of like fun plyometric style work. So like maybe it's right after a competition. they're not going to get the same benefit out of it because their nervous system's probably a little depleted and maybe they don't feel as explosive. But like it could be something as simple as like we're going to do seated box jumps and med ball throws as just a way to stimulate your nervous system. And then next week we'll start back with our back squat cycle or our snatch cycle. So they're getting some work in. They feel like they're being explosive, but they're still taking some time off where you're not just like going from high volume, hard competition right back into high volume where they don't have any time to recover.
Yeah. I think the only thing I would add to that is when we do like a local comp, usually they give you the workouts ahead of time. Mm-hmm. So I like to use that as the taper.
Yeah.
So once I have the workouts, I just kind of make like a little comp weekend, pull some of the volume out, maybe like still do the strength movements I was doing, but that week I might just like pull the percentages down, mm-hmm. or have them just do less volume.
Bit,
yeah, cut the volume down. And then typically I do the same thing after comps, no matter what it is. It's like 3 days off, and then like 2 or 3 days ramping up is usually like what I call it, but it's just like simple plyo stuff, some like light Olympic lifts or like technique work on an Olympic lift, and then back into the cycle the week after.
I think what frustrates me, and again, I don't want to digress too much and make it about nutrition and lifestyle, but those are the components where it's like when people aren't recovering well post-competition, that just is annoying because, then like taking your approach, you're doing it, you're just so following good principles, so you're going to taper about a week out, and then you have a week of deload after. But then if they're not recovering, I mean, some people we coach, like I'm thinking about, weak Wayne, 35-year-old dad, 3 kids, career, and that weekend competition could knock him out for a couple of weeks. So now if you're not doubling down on recovery, and we could talk about what that means, you could lose 4 weeks easily to that little weekend competition.
Yeah. It requires discipline from the athlete and then communication between athlete and coach to make sure that they're on the same page and have that conversation with your athlete of like, hey, here are the things you need to think about with sleep, nutrition, recovery protocols, whatever that you think that the athlete needs. A lot of it's just as simple as like, just get some sleep and make sure you're fueling.
Yeah, it is that simple. In practice, not as simple in practice, and that's where like kudos to Sean, who always say like, hey, if you want to play, you better recover, right? So, I'm just thinking back to old examples where you've had athletes go, it's just a little local comp, we'll train through it, and then it's like 4 weeks later, now you're finally getting back to that strength cycle that you were on before, and you do that 3 times a year. You've just lost 3 months.
I also see people like come off a comp that they've like Wadapo's is a good example because it's a little bigger than a local comp, but it's still not like a season priority usually. And like I'll have people like take a week off after, but they will do like nothing outside of the gym, like recovery wise. Like they won't eat, they don't like follow any of the principles that they typically do, and they're like just like shut their brain off for a week. And then they come back the next week to train, they're dying.
Yeah.
And everything, even if it's like easy stuff, and they're like, why do I suck? I was like, well, you shouldn't have been drinking beer for 5 straight days.
That's how I feel every day. Not the drinking beer part, but like, man, why am I dying?
Bernie, you need to talk to us about something? Yeah.
To go back, so let's give the other example just real quick. And we use Average Allen because we're using that avatar in our mentorship. But like to give everyone some perspective, when we say Average Allen, we're talking about a guy that's actually really strong or the lady that's really strong but doesn't have a conditioning base. So this is kind of the opposite of weak Wendy, who maybe or weak Wayne, who just doesn't have any strength, has no power output.
Give us some
numbers, so let's just say,
for like a local comp guy.
Yeah, let's say this guy actually maybe exaggerate the strength numbers. And I've seen these. I've had some of these athletes. Dom, you actually just mentioned this. Like a guy that maybe can clean 345 or 355. His snatch is 285. His back squat is like 450. His deadlift's 515.
Goals.
So all of his numbers are pretty solid. However, as soon as he does that 10-minute AMRAP of the clean and jerk ladder, he just is like, he completely bonks. Or he can do the heavy snatch, but then he does heavy Isabel, and after the first 5 reps look great, and then all of a sudden he's like getting super sloppy, or he just has to take extended rest because he can't recover between reps. This athlete's training must look different to improve his performance than weak Wendy. He's not doing a ton of 1RM strength work or maximal strength work. That's the person that we're introducing a lot of strength endurance work. You still want to make sure that they maintain their strength. And a lot of people that are that strong, like they don't even have to do much at all.
Let's talk about like that. I think we throw that out a lot. Just maintain your strength. And then people are like, what does that even mean? What does it mean to maintain? How would you give us some examples of how you might?
There are so many fun and easy ways that you can do this. Like as simple as
fun is the right word because you get to have more fun.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll still use like even a conjugate style where it's once every other week they build to like a true max effort back. But that's it, right? go to a heavy back squat, you're building to a heavy double, and that's all they do for their strength work, and then everything else after that is strength endurance based.
I think we probably all use that same approach, like some sort of conjugate method, which we bastardize the word conjugate. I don't even know what it means
For sure.
anymore because we just basically anything that we vary, we call it conjugate.
Yeah.
Any strength work we vary, we call it conjugate.
Yeah.
And any conditioning work that we vary, we call it CrossFit. So it's like it's very vague, but because Dom has like read everything from Louis Simmons.
No, definitely not.
Well, yeah, it's like his like random blogs. It's like trying to read Charlie Francis. Yeah, good luck. With Louis Simmons though, didn't he say? It's like I think this came from Simmons. I don't know the research on this, Brandon. Maybe you can speak to it. But how many like to maintain strength? How often do you need to touch it? I think Simmons always said like for his guys once every 10 days.
Yeah. That sounds right.
Okay. Are you aware of any actual? I'm sure that there is, but
I don't want to speak to it and say the wrong thing. But that's kind of the principle that I've always followed, and I even extend that out to 14 to 21 days, where it's like they may do a heavy back squat on 1 week just to get a touch on that, and then it's like 3 weeks before they do another actual back squat.
What are you doing in the intermediate?
In between, they may just do a heavy single leg movement, or they may do a box squat variation. So that's what I kind of mean by conjugate and variance of like they're still doing something heavy, but it's literally just like one maximal set, and then they're moving on, so that the focus of their training and the volume in their training is the strength endurance work, which for most athletes is going to be that between 75 and 90% doing repeat-based intervals or barbell cycling.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally just did that with Angelo's team today. They did like a deadlift. We've been doing like just a varied deadlift every week, like literally a different kind of deadlift. And we don't have like different bars here, so I've been kind of creating variants by using a chain or a band, or bands and chains is what they did today. And then their piece after was like hip extensions, box step overs, and GHD sit-ups.
Yeah.
And that was like what they did this morning, basically. And we're leading into comp next week, so we've been like, we did 3 RM, 2 RM, 1 RM, linearly across the weeks. And then we did like increase volume of some sort of like high volume hip extension into a single leg pattern. And then that's like literally what they did the last 3 weeks, and we just did variants.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, you can get stronger that way too, especially for someone that is experienced in strength work. For week Wendy or week Wayne, you're going to have a little bit more volume. They're going to have to do more sets that are probably above 85%. You're going to eventually have to get them over 90% more often. Yeah. So they're going to touch that multiple times per week, or at least every week, with the same movement patterns. Like they're going through a true back squat cycle and a true deadlift cycle, a true front squat cycle. And so that's kind of like the difference as far as what strength, absolute strength looks like. For week Wendy, she's probably not doing a ton of strength endurance work if you're trying to drive up 1 RMs. There's a lot of interference there. And I think it's just when you look at a template, you're thinking, well, I only have 90 minutes in the day to train this person. You have to focus on their priorities. Mm-hmm. So instead, and I have this problem all the time as a coach, and maybe you guys can speak to this too. It's like, I've got to get 15 things in, but I only have 90 minutes, 5 days a week. Okay, I got to cut some of these out. What are the priorities? And for the weak athlete, it has to be maximal strength.
Plug for Mayhem Performance. I had a conversation with a guy yesterday who's in the military on an intro call, and I was telling him, like, I mean, and I really believe this, when a lot of times people come to us and go, well, I don't have the time for that. Like, I don't have time for coaching. Like, if I could devote more time to it, then it would benefit me more. I actually think it's the complete opposite. The less time you have, the more valuable having a coach
100%.
is, because we will help you prioritize, give you the biggest bang for your buck. And it really opened it. He was like, actually, I never thought of it that way. And it is a sales pitch, whatever you want to call it, but it's true. It's like the less time you have, the more we can help you sift through what you can leave out or what you should leave out and what you need to prioritize.
Yeah, we're taking care of the time management for you.
Exactly.
So the only thing you're worried about is exactly what's on that piece of paper.
Yep. Yeah.
So Dom, because I've jumped in with Haley on some of these strength endurance pieces that she's done, can you, like, in maybe another athlete too, but like give some examples of things that you would do with maybe the strong athlete or the athlete that is getting ready for a competition that needs to get better, like the heavy Isabel is a perfect example, where you know that online semis are coming up and there probably will be some kind of heavy barbell cycling. What are just some like basic progressions in the way that you think about structuring that?
Yeah. I mean, Haley's a good example because people forget that she can like be top 5 on an Isabel, like she basically was at the Classic.
Yeah.
And even like on the snatch ladder last year, she did great. Snatch, definitely she's biased towards like her absolute on snatch is still good. She does snatch 185. Like that's not bad. But we like opposite for her. She likes the strength endurance stuff. So we keep it in there for her mentally, but really ideally, and the thing I always press on her is like, we keep a lot of absolute strength squatting infer. That's like the biggest change I've made to her programming, I think, is I like go to her and I'm like, you do not have a choice. You have to do this stuff. I don't care what, you can do whatever else you want to do. That's fine, but you cannot leave this out and you can't do it last. That's like always what I tell her. I was like, as long as you do that for me, you can write as many workouts as you want to write and do as much as you want to do. But if you at least make it a priority, we'll get something. And it's actually helped her a ton, to be honest. It's helped her so much. I think a couple even better examples would be like a Jorge and a Miley, because they're on complete opposite spectrums. You said like 14 to 21 days, which is funny. I would even put Jess in this category, who I coach. I literally cannot remember the last time I programmed Jess a back squat.
I saw she tagged you and was like, well, my one time a year I get to squat heavy or something
and
yesterday.
I programmed it for her because she got like a little neck tweak doing a kipping handstand push-up thing.
All right, well, I guess we got a back squat now.
So I was like, you know what? Let me just put a back squat touch in before we like compete in a week.
She had like have like 315 on the bar or something like that yesterday. I saw
literally,
yeah.
and she just hit the easiest double ever.
Yeah,
Man, I wish I had that.
She was like, I walked over to her and she was laughing because she was like, I know I don't need to back squat. And I was like, well, it's just proof. Like if we just touch some type of squat once a month, and she does front squat because there's movement efficiency issues in her front rack
for sure,
which affect her clean. So it's not like we don't squat, but we prioritize the one that she has movement efficiency patterns in, which then applies to like a back squat where she can just like bounce up and down. Jorge's like the same way. It's a funny story. I always tell it, but when Roman was like a little hurt last year, he was doing a back squatting thing and he had like 405 and he was doing like a couple reps, and Jorge had just finished like doing his off-season running progression, and he probably ran like 10 miles that day, and he walked in after running like the 10 miles in running shoes and put the 405 on his back and did like 5 reps and then like walked out without warming up. And I was like he's the same way. Like we literally just touch something. And honestly with him, the only stuff I really touch are some of his Olympic lifts because there's still movement efficiency issues there.
Yeah.
So I actually just use those for his strength. And he also has like he's very like anteriorly biased. So his front squat's really strong, his back squat's really strong, but everything's so quad dominant. So we do some absolute in his posterior, but that's where I do the absolute. I don't really do any absolute squatting for him.
That's Seth too. It's very similar.
At all.
Yeah.
We literally do not absolute squat touch for him. But his, like every morning we start, like his session 1, separate from his session 2, like even today, his session 1 was like some 5-minute AMRAPs and then some like hip flexor work in accessory. Yeah. And that was it. And then his session 2 has like some clean technique, some clean work, and then some like posterior accessory. And he's doing that second in the day. And that's pretty much his format like every day. Now, not that it's always 5-minute AMRAPs. One day is like long aerobic running. One day is like fatigued run, like heavy leg fatigued running specifically for him. Cause we were even looking at like the classic and like he's still 1.5 minutes behind a Sprague, even though he's knocked that workout out of the park for himself. So he's someone that's like the average, what do we call him? Average Allen.
Yeah.
Who like literally just needs to touch a heavy lift here and there and then work on technique on his lifts, but he doesn't really need to get any stronger like at all.
Yeah.
At all. But his running is so behind. His like high volume burpee, a lot of his like muscular endurance in gymnastics is also behind in his upper body. So
you just like walking through different athletes is like such a good example to of needing a coach or having a good plan. Because a lot of people can kind of just jump in and do whatever, and then at some point you do kind of plateau out if you're just kind of doing it on your own. But, you know, Dom, you just walk through like 4 different examples of like, hey, this athlete, this is what I'm doing, and this is why. This athlete, this is what I'm doing, and this is why. You have a plan in place for those athletes to target what I always call their rate-limiting step. Like, what are the things that are holding you back from getting to your goals? And every athlete needs to think that way or hire a coach so that they can think that way for you. It's so important.
Just a little like note here too, I think is like it doesn't always have to be maintained. It's actually okay if some numbers are so far off that you lose, right? Like some strength. I think when you're mentioning athletes, I'm thinking of a particular example of a guy I have in the military. His power clean is 350 and he snatches 225. And you're like, I don't care if your power clean goes to 330 if we can get your snatch to 245, 250. Could care less, right? Like, so just
it's still like, especially if you're in CrossFit, it's a performance game at the end of the day.
Yep.
So it's like, even if a number does drop, but you go up the leaderboard because we fixed that thing that you were finishing 5,000th in the open, like that helps.
Guess what this guy did for a sport growing up? 350 power clean, 225
football.
snatch. Oh yeah, for sure.
100%.
Yeah. Like I power cleans all
what
day.
You just said is huge too. Like I can even think about that in my own like whatever competitive career. But I remember like when I came into getting coached by Matt, I was like the 345 clean, the 275 snatch, But like the dumbbell snatch, burpee, box jump over workout from 2021, like the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, I like time capped by a mile.
Yeah.
But within 3 years of following a progression, I started being able to do that workout in like 10 minutes. And I was probably then maybe, snatch was always like just good movement efficiency, but I think my clean went down like 15 or 20 pounds.
But you got better at the sport.
So much better. I improved like literally 1,000 spots in the open between a year and a half.
That's what's so important. And, you know, hopefully I introduced it well, but kind of that was my point with strength work is you have to isolate what your limitations are so that you can get better at the sport. For the average Allen, he's already strong. We need to make sure we drive up all his barbell repeatability and just what we call strength endurance, like anything where it's a moderate to heavy load where you can cycle it over and over again, because that's what's testing the sport most often. For the really weak athlete, just to play the game, you have to get a little bit stronger. So I'm going to encourage everyone to make sure that you're identifying those limitations or hire a coach that can help you with that. I wanted to just go back real quick.
Not just any coach.
Yeah,
not performance coach.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
On,
Call Foster. You just brought up, talked about Haley's 1RM, and I did the numbers. I don't know if everyone saw me on my phone for a second, but because I'm not smart enough to actually do this in my head. But so she did a workout that she and I did the other day, 90% of her 1RM snatch, and she had about a minute left for each interval. We did 3 intervals, and she was hitting 7 to 8 reps in that 1 minute after rowing and burpees. Like, that is just absolutely insane to be able to get 90% on a barbell, and especially in a snatch after doing rowing and burpees where your shoulders are fatigued, your respiration's high, your heart rate's high, and still be able to cycle that. That's what an elite level performer does.
She had something. I did a bench workout with her like a couple months ago, and it was something like 85-ish%. It was 5 rounds of 10 bench. I had 225. She had, I forget what it was for her, and then it was like sandbag step ups. The step ups didn't matter, and like if there's one thing I'm good at in CrossFit, it's benching, which is not even a big CrossFit thing. But anyways, like, I thought for sure this will be the one workout I get Haley in. So I'm talking so much crap. And bro, like, yeah, I came out, I'm like cruising, 3rd round, I'm like, I got her. And then she just she didn't slow down at all. And it was like 50 reps at like 85 something % of her 1RM.
Yeah.
Maybe even close to 90. It was insane. And
she
and
might
relative
be
to
the
mine
best in the world at that.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Right.
When she texted me her numbers from that piece, I was like, I did not expect you to get that many snatches.
Yeah. I mean, the conversation I think you guys had before is like, yeah, just see if you can hit 3 reps, right? And then she's she's like tripling it or doubling it, which is insane. But my point there is that, like, she's looking at this and like, okay, I'm really good at the strength endurance. You want to keep that as strength because in the games or at a semifinal, that's tested the most often. And then she'll just keep trying to drive up her 1RMs because that's the rate limiting step. Whereas most athletes maybe are on the opposite end of the spectrum, either really strong and terrible at the endurance-based work or really weak and just need to drive up their 1RMs. But going back to that main point, you have to be able to identify that.
Maybe the strength endurance work is something we can throw on a whiteboard and show some progressions of how we like to do that.
Miley would be a great example. I was going to use her for that because actually for age group, I thought they might do Isabel. And I was actually prepping her for the 155 range, and then they gave 16, 17-year-olds 105 pounds. But even almost like prepping her for the 155, like, helped her at the 105 because she is the athlete that needed like absolute as well. And like, that was one thing I kind of pushed her all the way. I was like, honestly, like, I'm not too worried about Isabel at 155. Even if you make an in-person online, I was like, I really want to get your 1RM snatch up, which like we've just gotten it up to 175, which when I started with her was like, I think 160. But because she can snatch 175 and she's similar to Haley where she can move 85 to 90% really well, her 1RM just going up on the snatch automatically gave her the ability to finish Isabel in the time cap. Now, does she still need work on it to be able to do it in 6 minutes? Of course. But she literally had zero ability to even do that workout when her max was 160. Now that her max is 175, she can actually do like a rep every 20 seconds and finish in 9 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, Foster, you talked about this earlier with the ring muscle up example of like, if you just get better at ring muscle ups, then in a workout, they will get better. And then eventually you have to get to the performance where you are doing them under fatigue. But yes, the same thing's true with strength, right? Like if 225-pound deadlifts come out in a workout, everyone remembers the 1 up to 10, back down to 1 deadlift and burpee workout. And a lot of people just like blew up, their backs blew up, probably because of the combination. But let's just say that my max deadlift was 315 pounds. Now 225 is whatever that is. Again, my math's not very good, but 70% or 75%. Whereas maybe another athlete is 450 or 500-pound deadlift. Now it's 50% or even more or less, of their max. It's going to just naturally be easier for
Sure.
them.
You know, Zadazorski gave a percentage for that because I was reading.
Oh, and
What is the book again? What's the title?
Oh my gosh, I forgot. That's my
I'm
favorite.
blanking
book.
on it. But he actually gave a percentage of when the percentage of somebody's 1 rep max, when it for a muscle endurance component, when it doesn't really matter anymore. I think it had to be something. I'm pretty sure it was less than 25%.
Yeah, well, that's
like,
crazy.
Like you take like a bench example. Again, I suck at math. You've got a 100-pound bench, and then like if you had people do a max set. Help me with some of the numbers here in the math.
Well, it'd be 25 pounds.
Right.
If it's
Thank
100.
you.
Thank you for making it very easy and well-rounded.
Yeah, 100. Yeah. So at that point, it doesn't matter anymore. It would like who can move. I don't know, like a 10-pound dumbbell bench more or whatever. I don't. That's a terrible example.
Yeah.
I should have thought through that more. But yeah, which is very rare that's going to come up.
I mean, usually it
So,
is 50% or 75%.
Yeah.
And as you get to in-person competitions, a lot of times they force you to cycle 75 to 85% or even 90%. Heavy Isabel was 90% for a lot of athletes. So you have to practice that and you have to be really good at that. But to earn that right, going back to week Wendy or week Wayne, you have to drive up your 1RMs in the off season. So I want to kind of like circle all the way back just to give some like practical application for the athletes. If you are in the sport and you are not strong enough to do some of the things that are required for your goals. So let's just kind of take that step back and say, what's your goal? Is it the open? Okay, we know like most often there's going to be 135 or 95 pound barbell in one of the tests, a 50 or 35 pound dumbbell in one of the tests, and then maybe there is a max lift or some kind of ladder. That is what it is. You need to at least be able to cycle that 135 or 95 pound barbell and do a 50 and 35 pound dumbbell. If your goal is an in-person competition, then usually now you're talking about you have to be able to squat clean 225 or 155, or maybe snatch 185, 125. Like that's kind of the standard now in these in-person competitions that are just local. If you want to make a semifinal now, it's snatch 275 or 265 for a man or a male, and 185 or 175 for a female. So you need to look at all those numbers and kind of figure out where are you on that graph and how do you drive yourself up to at least as close to those numbers as possible before you even talk about competing.
Yeah, it's good. Science and practice of strength training.
Thank you. Yeah. We'll look at the percentage later. I'm pretty sure it's 25, but anyway.
It's a great book.
Yeah, I think that's like 55 pounds on a 225 deadlift or something like that, where it would no longer, what your 1RM is no longer relevant for what muscle endurance.
Yeah.
So,
but that is
that
irrelevant
won't
in
happen.
sport of
It will
CrossFit.
not happen.
Yeah,
exactly.
The lightest you're going to see for
in other words,
deadlift.
it almost always matters in the sport of CrossFit what your 1RM is. It will almost always benefit you to have a higher 1RM in your muscle endurance at lighter loads. Is the main takeaway from that.
Yeah.
So.
I think the tendency, though, for those that are really strong, they enjoy being strong. And so they bias a lot of their strength training just to doing the heavy back squat. Like, it's fun, for Jess to do a 315 double. I'm sure that feels good. I don't even know what that feels like, But being able to do that is enjoyable. So most people just, without a coach, go in, like, I'm just going to keep doing these back squats to drive that up. But that's not the limiting step in their training.
Yeah.
So
But this is the thing I always get in trouble for. It's like, but it's fun. It's like, well, I thought you want to win.
Yeah.
That back squat does not help her with wall balls at all.
It's not.
It is
literally
crazy.
at all. It's
25%. That wall ball's 14 pounds.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a perfect example of identifying that limitation and making sure.
That's actually where the Zadazorski rule would then actually come into play.
Yeah.
Where it's
Exactly.
Your 1RM is not going to help you with the wall ball.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, especially and throwing it up to a 10-foot target if you're only 5'2". Yeah, for sure. Let's do a toolkit video. Give some people some practical application on like what is the strength. Maybe just a quick split on absolute strength and then strength endurance.
Let's ride.
Cool.
Sweet.